Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. Picture a sleepy little town on a lazy afternoon. Out of nowhere, a mischievous kid grabs a brick and launches it straight through the baker's shop window. The crash of shattering glass rings out like a bell, echoing down the cobblestone street. The baker bursts through his door, face red with rage, but the culprit has already vanished into thin air. Within minutes, a curious crowd forms around the crime scene. They stare at the jagged hole where a perfectly good window used to be, at the glittering shards now decorating the fresh loaves and apple pies. But here's where things get interesting. Instead of just feeling sorry for the poor baker, some folks in the crowd start spinning a different tale. You know, one armchair philosopher pipes up, "This isn't entirely bad news. At least the glazier will get some business out of it." Another voice joins in. "Exactly. A window like that must cost, what, a couple $100? That's real money. Come to think of it, if windows never broke, how would glassmakers stay in business?" The murmurs grow louder. Suddenly, the crowd seeing this whole thing through rose-tinted glasses. The glazier pockets $200. He'll spend it at the butcher. Who'll spend it at the hardware store? Who'll spend it somewhere else? Round and round it goes, creating jobs and prosperity wherever it touches. Following this logic to its natural conclusion, the little troublemaker who chucked that brick wasn't a menace to society at all. He was basically a hometown hero. This quirky little tale holds the key to one of the most powerful yet misunderstood concepts on the planet. It's the beating heart of a book that sold over 1 million copies and lit the way for clear-headed thinking for more than 75 years, Economics in One Lesson, written by the brilliant journalist Henry Hazlitt. Hazlitt was no ivory tower academic drowning in jargon. He had a gift for taking the complicated and making it crystal clear. In this book, he made an audacious claim that the entire sprawling field of economics, with all its mind-bending complexity, could be boiled down to a single principle. Here's my promise to you. By the time we're done today, you won't just understand that principle, you'll own it. It'll become like a new pair of glasses that lets you see the economic truth hiding in plain sight. You'll develop a kind of superpower, the ability to see through the seductive lies and half-truths that politicians, pundits, and even business leaders serve up every single day. This goes way beyond economics. It's about learning to think with precision and clarity. It's about uncovering the hidden ripple effects of our choices. So let's head back to that baker's shop and learn to see what everyone else missed. Let's discover the one lesson that changes absolutely everything. Here it is, the single principle that unlocks the entire world of economics. The art of economics consists in looking not merely at the immediate, but at the longer effects of any act or policy. It consists in tracing the consequences of that policy, not merely for one group, but for all groups. That's the whole enchilada. Sounds almost too simple, right? But here's the kicker. Nearly every economic disaster that's ever happened, every policy that's kept nations poor and held humanity back, springs from forgetting this one truth. What separates a brilliant economist from a terrible one? It's straightforward. The terrible economist only sees what's right in front of his nose. The brilliant economist sees around corners, spotting the hidden consequences lurking in the shadows. Let's revisit our shattered window. The crowd wasn't completely wrong in their first observation. The act of vandalism really did put money in the glazier's pocket, at least in the short run. That part's visible to everyone. A shiny new window appears in the shopfront, and the glazier walks away with cash in hand. But the crowd forgot to ask the million-dollar question. What was the baker planning to do with that money before some punk smashed his window? Turns out the baker had been saving up for a new suit from the local tailor. The money was already earmarked, but now it has to go toward replacing glass instead. So while the glazier celebrates a new customer, the tailor just lost one. The tailor is the ghost in this story, the forgotten soul nobody's thinking about. The crowd will admire the new window when it's installed, but they'll never see that beautiful suit, for the simple reason that it will never exist. No magical new jobs appeared out of thin air. Business just got shuffled from the tailor to the glazier. The town isn't one penny richer. In fact, it's actively poorer by exactly one suit that would have otherwise hung in someone's closet. Sure, it has a new window, but it already had a window before the kid went berserk. What it lost is that suit. This is what's called the broken window fallacy, and once you grasp it, you'll start spotting it everywhere, dressed up in 1,000 different costumes. It's hands down the most stubborn and damaging mistake in the entire history of economic thought. It's pretty easy to call out the foolishness when we're talking about one busted window, but what about massive destruction? After war's end, people often gush about the economic miracles that follow. They survey the flattened cities and gleefully calculate all the pent-up demand that'll need satisfying. Rebuilding those cities, they declare, will create countless jobs and jumpstart the economy. But this is just the broken window fallacy that's been gorging itself at an all-you-can-eat buffet. War destroys accumulated capital. It obliterates real wealth, the homes, factories, and bridges that took generations to build. When those have to be replaced, it means a nation's labor and resources get diverted into recreating what it already possessed. There's a dangerous confusion here between need and demand. Sure, a bombed-out city desperately needs new houses, but need alone doesn't equal economic demand. Real demand requires actual purchasing power. After a war, a nation is broke, not prosperous. Its ability to create wealth has been crippled. The visible effect is all the bustling activity in construction. New buildings rise from the ashes, and workers earn paychecks. But the invisible effect is what those same people and resources could have been creating instead. They could have been inventing new technologies, manufacturing better cars, producing more food, advancing civilization instead of just patching it back together. A nation rebuilding from war is like someone whose house burned down. Sure, rebuilding will keep him busy, but no sane person would torch their own home thinking it would make them wealthy. What's catastrophic for one person is equally catastrophic for a whole country, which is just a collection of individuals. Destruction never brings prosperity. It's always a setback, a tragedy, plain and simple. This same fundamental mistake, seeing only the immediate benefit to one group while missing the hidden cost to everyone else, props up the most influential economic idea today: blind faith in government spending. Everywhere you look, government spending gets pitched as the cure for everything. Unemployment problem? The government needs to spend more too, create jobs. Economy in the dumps? The government must spend to boost purchasing power. Let's examine a typical scenario. The government decides to construct a bridge. It's presented as this magnificent project that will put hundreds to work. That's the visible part. We see the workers showing up each day. We watch the steel and concrete taking shape. We admire the finished bridge. It's solid, tangible proof of progress. But where does the money come from? Taxes. For every dollar the government spends building that bridge, a dollar gets yanked from a taxpayer's wallet. If the bridge costs $10 million, taxpayers are collectively $10 million poorer. They've been stripped of money they would have spent on things they actually wanted. Maybe a new car, a washing machine, better clothes for the kids, or a family vacation. So for every job the government creates on that bridge, a private job vanishes somewhere else in the economy. We see the bridge builders hard at work. What we don't see are the auto workers who never got hired, the appliance technicians who got laid off, or the farmers whose sales dropped. The jobs destroyed by those $10 million in taxes are scattered and invisible across the entire economy. At best, jobs have just been reshuffled. But actually, it's worse than that. The government is taking money from people to build something those same people didn't choose to fund voluntarily. If folks truly needed that bridge more than the other things they wanted to buy, they likely would have found a way to finance it privately. When government steps in, whether the project is actually necessary becomes an afterthought. The real goal morphs into simply providing employment. Once the bridge is finished, the argument shifts gears. "Look at this magnificent bridge," the spenders crow. "Where would we be if the penny pinchers had gotten their way?" The country's better off for it. Again, they're fixated on the bridge. But train your mind to see the invisible alternatives. Picture in your imagination the homes that never got built, the cars that never rolled off the assembly line, the food that never made it to market. These are the things that never got a chance to exist because the money was confiscated to build that bridge. It's not a story of getting something for nothing. It's a story of getting one thing instead of another. This exact logic applies to every flavor of government spending, from public housing projects to massive undertakings like the Tennessee Valley Authority. When money gets sucked out of the entire country and dumped into one region, naturally that region appears wealthier. But all the other regions get poorer. Private capital has been seized to build whatever the government fancies. We see the photogenic dam, but we never see the private power plants, the new factories, and the consumer goods that got strangled in their cribs. The problem runs even deeper. Taxes don't just move money around, they actively discourage production. When a business knows it can only keep a fraction of what it earns, while still bearing 100% of its losses, it becomes gun-shy. It avoids risks. It doesn't expand. New businesses never get started. When someone knows that a big chunk of their hard work will vanish into the tax collector's pocket, their motivation to work harder takes a nosedive. The government spenders, in their crusade to solve unemployment, end up creating the very problem they claim to be fixing. They drain the private sector of the capital needed to create real, lasting jobs. Another crowd-pleasing form of government meddling comes through credit programs. Politicians love to argue that certain groups, like farmers, can't get enough credit from private sources. So the government establishes agencies to lend them money. Sounds noble, right? Here's a struggling family barely scraping by. Let's lend them money to buy a farm and a tractor. They can become productive citizens and add to the nation's prosperity. But once again, we need to look at what's hidden. What's really being lent isn't money, but capital. The actual farm, the actual tractor. The supply of farms and tractors is limited. If a farm goes to farmer B, it can't simultaneously go to farmer A. The crucial question becomes, who deserves that farm? Private lenders, like your local banker, risk their own money. They're careful as cats crossing a street. They investigate the borrower's character, experience, and trustworthiness. They'll probably lend to farmer A, someone with a proven track record of hard work and smart decisions. But the entire argument for government lending hinges on making loans to people who can't get them privately. That means the government will hand money to farmer B, who's a shakier bet. The government is gambling with taxpayers, money in ways that private lenders would never risk their own cash. So because farmer B gets a farm, the more skilled, more reliable farmer A loses out. The available capital ends up in less capable hands. The bottom line isn't more wealth but less. production gets wasted and capital gets misallocated. B stands in the spotlight while A gets forgotten. Perhaps the most zombie-like of all economic fallacies is the belief that machines ultimately create unemployment. This myth has been debunked 1,000 times, yet it crawls out of its grave every time the economy hits a rough patch. Think about it. Primitive humans must have created unemployment the moment they invented the first tool to make life easier. Adam Smith, way back in 1776, described a pin-making factory where, thanks to machinery, one person could crank out 4,800 pins a day. Without those machines, he'd struggle to make even one. Following the anti-machine logic, machinery had already cost thousands of pin makers their livelihoods. During the Industrial Revolution, English stocking knitters smashed the new knitting machines in fits of rage, terrified for their jobs. In the short term, their fears made sense. Many really did suffer. But by the end of the 19th century, the stocking industry employed at least 100 workers for every one it employed at the start. Same story with Arkwright's cotton spinning machinery. When he invented it, roughly 7,900 people worked in England's cotton textile industry. The invention faced fierce opposition. Yet 27 years later, a parliamentary investigation revealed the industry employed 320,000 people, an explosion of over 4,000%. How does this magic trick work? Let's follow the breadcrumbs. Imagine a clothing manufacturer installs a fancy new machine that cuts the labor needed to make overcoats in half. He lays off half his workforce. That's the visible effect, the immediate pain of lost jobs. But hold on. That machine didn't build itself. Someone had to manufacture it, creating jobs that wouldn't have existed otherwise. More importantly, the manufacturer only bought that machine to fatten his profits. Now he's got extra money burning a hole in his pocket. What are his options? First, he might expand his own operation, buying more machines and producing more coats. That creates more jobs right there. Second, he could invest those profits in a completely different industry. That creates jobs over there. Third, he might splurge on personal luxuries, a bigger house, a nicer car. That creates jobs in construction and automotive industries. No matter what he chooses, the money he saved on direct wages now gets paid out as indirect wages. He's creating just as many jobs indirectly as he eliminated directly. But the story doesn't end there. His competitors need to buy the same machine to stay competitive. That means even more work for the machine manufacturers. As everyone starts producing coats more cheaply, the price of overcoats drops. Now the savings flow to consumers. Because overcoats cost less, more people can afford them. The industry might wind up employing even more workers than before to meet this surge in demand. That's exactly what happened with stockings and cotton textiles. But even if not a single extra coat sells, consumers still win. Each buyer has leftover money they wouldn't have had before. They'll spend it on something else, creating jobs in other industries. Bottom line, machines don't steal jobs on balance. What they really do is boost production and raise living standards. They make goods cheaper for consumers and increase real wages by making workers more productive. The goal of civilization isn't to create more backbreaking labor. It's to create more stuff with less sweat. Long, grueling, soul-crushing work is the hallmark of poor, backward nations. The real goal is to maximize what we produce, and full employment naturally follows as a happy side effect. This brings us to labor union practices. Many of these, like spread the work schemes, rest on the same fallacy as the fear of machines, the mistaken belief that there's only a fixed pie of work to go around. In construction, for example, Unions might insist that an electrician can't touch wood. That's the carpenter's territory. A plumber can't lay tile. That belongs to the tile setter. These rigid rules, called featherbedding, always drive up costs. The homeowner forced to hire 2 people for one person's work does give employment to an extra worker. That's what everyone sees. But he's got less money to spend elsewhere, say on a new sweater. Labor as a whole gains nothing, because employing an unnecessary tile setter means not employing a sweater maker. The homeowner, though, definitely loses. He gets his fixed shower but no sweater. The nation is poorer by 1 sweater. The same flawed thinking drives proposals to shorten the work week by law without cutting weekly pay. That means hourly wages must jump to compensate. The immediate result is a brutal spike in production costs. This will force the weakest companies out of business and throw the least skilled workers onto the street. The policy designed to cure unemployment actually creates it. Now let's shine our light on international trade. No economic topic is more clouded by nonsense than protective tariffs. An American manufacturer marches into Congress and declares that if the tariff on foreign sweaters gets axed, he'll be driven out of business by cheap imports. He insists he's not thinking of himself but of his loyal employees. Throw them out of work, and you've got unemployment and collapsing purchasing power. That's the visible effect. Kill the tariff, and the manufacturer might indeed go belly up, his workers hitting the unemployment line. But there's an invisible effect. Without the tariff, American consumers can now buy a sweater for, say, $25 instead of $30. For every sweater purchased, they've got $5 left over to spend on something else. That $5 creates jobs in other American industries. But wait, there's more. By buying British sweaters, we're putting dollars in British hands. What can they do with those dollars? They've got to use them to buy American goods. Because we've let them sell more to us, they can now buy more from us. So while the American sweater industry might shrink, our most efficient export industries, like aircraft manufacturing or tech, grow. American employment on the whole stays steady. But production shoots up. Workers in both countries now focus on what they do best. Consumers in both countries come out ahead. A tariff doesn't raise wages. Long-term, it actually lowers them. By forcing our labor and capital into industries where we're less efficient, it drags down the average productivity of American workers. Everyone's purchasing power takes a hit. A tariff wall works like a real wall. It blocks trade and makes everyone poorer. Related to the fear of imports is the obsessive craving for exports. But over the long haul, imports must equal exports. Exports pay for imports, and vice versa. When we slash our imports, we're effectively slashing our exports too, because foreigners won't have the money to buy our stuff. That's why government loans or subsidies to boost exports are so misguided. If the government loans money to a foreign country to buy our goods, and that loan never gets repaid, we're basically giving our stuff away for free. No nation ever got rich by handing out freebies. The visible effect is extra business for the export industry. The invisible effect is the loss shouldered by taxpayers stuck footing the bill for the bad loan. The same twisted logic drives schemes to fix prices. Let's first examine government attempts to hold prices artificially low, below their natural market level. This is commonly known as price control, with rent control being a special flavor. The argument for rent control is that it protects tenants from greedy landlords during housing shortages. The visible effect is that current tenants pay less rent. The invisible effects are numerous and devastating. First, it encourages wasteful use of space. A family whose kids have grown up and moved out has zero incentive to downsize to a smaller, cheaper apartment. They camp out in their large, rent-controlled space indefinitely. Second, it kills new construction. Builders have no reason to build new housing if they know their profits will be artificially capped. Third, it leads to neglect. Landlords, with their income squeezed dry, have neither the money nor motivation to make repairs and maintain their properties. The quality of housing slowly rots. The longer rent control stays in place, the worse the housing shortage becomes. Eventually, entire neighborhoods decay into slums. The government, having created the crisis, then rides in with another solution: public housing, bankrolled by taxpayers. Rent control is a textbook case of a policy whose long-term consequences flip its intentions completely upside down. Now let's flip to the other side. Attempts to prop prices up artificially high above their market level. This includes minimum wage laws. A wage is just the price of labor. When the government passes a law saying nobody can be paid less than a certain amount per hour, the first thing that happens is anyone not worth that much to an employer simply won't get hired. You can't legislate someone into being more valuable. You just replace low wages with no wages. Unemployment. The visible effect is that workers who keep their jobs earn more money. The invisible effect is the teenager, the unskilled worker, or the disadvantaged person who's now considered unhirable because their productivity isn't high enough yet to justify the legal minimum. They're denied the first rung on the career ladder, the chance to gain skills and prove themselves. The minimum wage law, meant to help the poor, hurts them most severely. The real way to raise wages isn't through government decrees but by raising worker productivity. This happens through more capital investment, better machines and tools, more efficient management, and better education and training. Real wages flow from production, not from laws scribbled on paper. Finally, we arrive at inflation. The appeal of inflation rests on the oldest economic blunder: confusing money with wealth. Real wealth consists of the actual things we produce and consume: food, clothes, houses. Printing more pieces of paper stamped with dollar signs doesn't magically create more of those things. What inflation really does is mess with the relationship between prices and costs. When the government prints fresh money, it doesn't distribute it evenly to everyone at the same instant. The first recipients of the new money, say, government contractors, get to spend it before prices have climbed. They get the full benefit of that spending power. But as they spend it, demand for goods increases, and prices begin creeping upward. The next group to receive the money discovers that prices have already risen a bit, and so on down the chain. The last groups to receive the new money, perhaps people on fixed incomes or those in politically unconnected industries, find their living costs have skyrocketed long before their incomes budge. They're the ones secretly paying for the gains of the early receivers. Inflation is a sneaky form of taxation. It's perhaps the cruelest tax of all because it's hidden, and it hammers hardest those least able to bear it. It punishes saving and rewards reckless speculation. It shreds the fabric of a stable economy. It's economic opium, creating an illusion of prosperity while quietly destroying real wealth. Every one of these fallacies, from the broken window to public works projects, from tariffs to inflation, springs from the same core mistake. It's the error of focusing only on the short-run effects on a single group, while forgetting the long-run effects on everybody. The division of labor in modern society makes this error almost inevitable. Each of us produces one thing but consumes hundreds of things. As producers, we might wish for scarcity in our own field, because it could mean higher prices for what we sell. A wheat farmer, thinking selfishly, might hope for crop failures among competing farmers. But as consumers, we all benefit from abundance. That's the great paradox. What seems true for a single group in isolation turns false for the community as a whole. The mission of economic science is to correct this fragmented vision. It's about seeing problems not in isolated pieces, but as an interconnected whole. It's about tracing the ripples of every economic action, not just where they begin, but to every shore they eventually reach. That's the one lesson. It demands patience and clear thinking. But once you've mastered it, you'll never see the world the same way again. Henry Hazlitt's one lesson is, in many ways, a lesson in intellectual humility. It reminds us that every action triggers consequences, both seen and unseen. It's a powerful antidote to the arrogance of central planners and politicians who imagine they can orchestrate an economy from their offices without causing unintended havoc. Why does this single, straightforward lesson get ignored so consistently? The reason is deeply human. The benefits of misguided economic policies are almost always immediate and concentrated. The jobs created by a government project are visible and photogenic. The industry saved by a tariff is tangible and grateful. The group receiving a subsidy is loud, organized, and well-connected. They have lobbyists, spokespeople, and compelling stories that tug at heartstrings. The costs of that same policy, however, are almost always delayed and scattered like seeds in the wind. They're spread across millions of taxpayers and consumers, often in amounts so small that individuals barely notice. The private job that never materialized, the innovation that never happened, the purchase that never got made. These are invisible ghosts. They have no lobbyists. They have no voice. And so the seen triumphs over the unseen, and the short-term illusion of prosperity wins out over the long-term reality of economic decline. Today, Hazlitt's lesson matters more than ever. We're living in an age of relentless government intervention. Every single day brings new proposals designed to help one group or another. We hear passionate calls for student loan forgiveness, for more subsidies, for higher tariffs, for stricter regulations. Each gets presented with the purest intentions. But now you've got the mental toolkit to analyze them properly. When you hear a new proposal, practice these 3 simple mental habits. First, always ask, and then what? Don't stop at the first, obvious effect. Chase the consequences to the second, third, and fourth ripple. Think several moves ahead, like a chess player. Second, identify the invisible casualties. For any policy, you'll be shown the smiling beneficiary front and center. Your job is to find the forgotten person silently paying the price in the shadows. Who's the tailor losing a customer because of the broken window? Who's the consumer paying more because of the tariff? Who's the unskilled worker losing job opportunities because of the minimum wage? And third, think of the economy not as a machine to be controlled, but as a complex, living ecosystem. You can't tweak one part without affecting all the others. The goal isn't to artificially help one industry at the expense of others, but to create a framework of stable laws and sound money that allows everyone to flourish through voluntary cooperation and free exchange. That was the book summary of Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. We've definitely hit the main ideas today, but let me be straight with you. A summary can only ever be a map. The real treasure reveals itself when you explore the territory yourself. The true power of this book isn't just in the logic. It's in the clarity and conviction radiating from every page Hazlitt wrote. This summary is designed to give you a powerful tool for thinking clearly. But if anything we've discussed today has sparked a light in your mind, I strongly encourage you to grab a copy of the actual book. Reading it isn't just learning. It's like having a wise mentor sit down with you over coffee and patiently explain how the world really works. You'll find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning, and let's keep growing together.